Hey, this is Russ. I'm back out here on the 3-mile path. I call it the 3-mile path because it just goes around in circles for 3 miles. Now, the last time I did one of these videos of things to consider, it was a video about important things to consider for e-bike or e-bikers that are senior riders. Okay, well, this video is going to be for that, but also for anybody else too. You don't have to be a senior to be looking at these things. A friend of mine had recently asked me if I had a video out about what to consider in buying an e-bike, because he's thinking maybe one day he would like to buy an e-bike. So he figured, he'll just watch a Russ's Ride video, tell him everything he needs to look for. I thought about that and I said, I got to do an update video. There's a lot of things that I've learned over time, and I'd like to include those things in that video. So that's today's video. I thought about it. I says, should I do this in the studio and just sit there and talk to you guys, or should we ride around and talk? I think it's more fun if we ride and we talk. So that's what we're gonna do. So let's talk about it. What are the things that you should consider in buying an e-bike? Well, let's talk about the main things you should look at. There's different types of e-bikes, obviously. Let's start with that. There's commuter bikes. There's folding bikes, okay? There's what some people would call mountain bikes, but they're not really mountain bikes. I don't even know what they would call it. Like the bike I'm riding right now is the Magicycle Cruiser. And it's a bigger bike. It's a bigger bike. But I wouldn't consider it a mountain bike per se. I mean, it's not designed specifically for mountain biking. You could use it for that if you wanted to, but I don't think it was designed specifically for it. It kind of covers everything. So how do you know what type of bike you should buy? All right. Well, I would have to say, of the various types of bikes available, the most flexible has to be the folding bike. All right. And here's why I feel that's the case. If the bike folds in half, sorry, I got things going into my eye here. It's the problem when you're riding sometimes, things fly into your face, bugs fly into you, dust flies into you. Talk about safety things in a minute. If your bike can fold, and I'm going to throttle a lot here too, because that way I don't have to think about the pedaling while I'm talking. If the bike can fold in half and the handlebars fold down, it becomes small enough that you could actually put that bike inside your SUV, in the back of your SUV. Some people have been known to even put it inside a sedan or even in the trunk of their car, depending on how big your trunk is. So the advantage to that, of course, is transporting that bike to different locations. If you're only going to ride around your house, go around the streets around your house, then the folding bike doesn't mean a whole lot, really. You might not even ever fold it. But if you're planning on going to some trails that are at a distance from you, being able to transport the bike by just folding it in half is a big deal. Because if you don't do that, the only way to transport, say, like a bike like I'm riding now, this big heavy bike here, you would need to get a hitch to be placed on the rear of your car or SUV, preferably SUV or a truck. And then you'd have to buy, and that's an installation cost of the hitch, of course, and that could be several $100s, if you have it professionally installed. And then you got to buy a bike rack, one that you can put on the back of your vehicle, and then put these heavy bikes on there. And those bike racks could cost you $500 or more dollars. Okay. There's other options. You can buy like a motorcycle rack, which is actually cheaper, believe it or not. But you have to use straps to strap your bike down, and a lot of people don't like to do that. They like the bike racks have special attachments to kind of lock the bike in place. And so you pay extra for those things, of course. So usually they're $500 or more. So the added cost to just do that, could raise your cost almost $1,000, paying for the hitch and the installation of the hitch plus the bike rack. So you can see where a folding bike would come in handy at that point. Or you can buy one of these big bikes, all right? Like the Magicycle Cruiser, the Rad Rovers, the Hemiway Cruiser, or one of these type of bikes. These are big bikes, so a lot of people who buy these full-size bikes figure that they can handle it, or they'll buy a step-through version. We'll talk about step-through and step-over versions in a minute. But we find a lot of people, after they've purchased their bikes, decide to sell their bikes off because they're too big for them. They feel they're too big. They may not necessarily be, but they feel they are. And so a lot of these bikes go on to the used market right away. I mean, I've seen bikes, it's only got 30 miles. Some people, it's only got 12 miles. I mean, it's like ridiculously small amount. And so you could pick up a deal by buying a used bike. The problem with that is you don't get any warranty at all, because the warranties are usually not transferable. So why do people buy these big bikes? Well, they feel nice. My preference is actually riding these big heavy bikes. They just have a different feel to them. I mean, they ride really nice. They're bigger wheels. Instead of the folding bikes 20-inch wheels, you now have 26-inch wheels. Some of them are 27 and a half. They just ride really nice. They're nice and smooth and everything. What about the weight? People say, what about the weight? Well, surprisingly, some of these folding bikes are just as heavy as this bike. I'm not kidding. My wife has a Rad Mini Step-Thru 2. It weighs the same as the Rad Rover 5. So if you look at it, the weight is not really saved. It may look smaller in stature, but it's just as heavy. But I do like riding the larger bikes. It just feels better to me. But it comes again a question of step-through or step-over bikes. Now, what is the difference between that? Well, let's go back and go politically incorrect, all right? In today's world, we used to call these boys' bikes and girls' bikes. Remember that? The step-over bike would be considered a boy's bike back then. The step-through bikes would be considered a girl's bike. So what does that mean? Well, there's an open area. There's no center bar that comes up high that you can't just step over and get in on the bike. Okay, you have to actually swing your leg over the saddle, which is also known as a seat to some people. So in that sense, for some people who have maybe some mobility issues that prevent them from swinging their leg over a tall saddle, a step-through bike might be easier to work with. Now, the problem we have here is, of course, many of the guys feel, well, I'm not buying a girl's bike. Yeah, you know what? It's not a girl's bike anymore. All right? They don't call it a girl's bike anymore. It's called a step-through bike. And I think they did that, for two reasons. First off, the political incorrectness of it. Is it political? I don't know. Of calling something a girl's bike or a boy's bike. There's really not a sex oriented to a bike, but also there's a convenience of being able to step through the frame rather than having to swing your leg over the top of it. So in that sense, it's a benefit to the industry, I guess, because they can sell that bike then to anybody. But between the two, I see the benefit of the step-through design, not having to swing your leg over. Now, even with a step-over design, you swing your leg over, what I typically do is I'll lean the bike to one side and then swing my leg over. If you don't lean the bike over to the side, you have a high amount of height that you have to swing your leg over. I mean, the saddle is kind of high up if you have it properly adjusted. Lean the bike over a little bit, it brings that height a little bit lower. It's a little bit easier to swing your leg over it, okay? But think about the step through where you can just walk through the frame. I mean, there's nothing here. There's nothing, let me lean down here. There's nothing over here that gets in your way. This one's actually considered a mid-step. It's a little bit lower than a step over, but it's not low enough to be considered a step through. All right. On this type of frame, it gives you clearance over here for guys. When you hop off the bike, if you have to stop and hop off, you don't have anything hitting you where it counts. All right. So in that sense, this mid step comes in handy, but it's not low enough to be able to be considered where you can just walk through it like a regular step through bike. So what's my preference? Well, I have two preferences. I like the step through and I like the step over. Now, what does that mean? You're non-committal, right? No, here's my logic behind it. On one of my bikes, the Rad Rover 5, I actually modified the wiring on that bike so that I can put a different type of battery in there. It's called a triangle battery, on a step over bike, because you got that top bar on the top up here. It creates a little triangle between the down tube and your seat stay and your seat post and all that stuff. There's a little triangle in there, okay? You could mount a triangle battery in that triangle, and that's what I ended up doing. So I carry a second battery on the rear rack. So I essentially have two batteries I carry with me. Having that step over triangle in there makes that easy to do. A step through bike would never be able to put a triangle battery there because there's nothing to strap the top part onto, because you don't have a top part because it's a step through bike. So in that sense, the step over bike is the preferred bike if you're going to do something like that with a triangle battery. But as far as the ability to get on the bike, I can see the definite benefit of the step through design, because now I don't have to swing my leg over, I just walk straight through it. And when I hop off the bike, there's nothing there to impede anything. I mean, you're not going to hit anything because there's no top tube up there in your way. So yeah, there's no real good answer to which of the two is best for you. You have to kind of decide what style of bike do I want. This whole thing of girls bike, boys bike, that's no longer the case. Nobody cares anymore, okay? You're gonna find a lot of people who are guys ride step through bikes. One of the bikes that I had called the KBO commuter bike, that's a step-through design, perfect step-through design. In fact, you can get your leg right through it. There's nothing to worry about. But the Magicycle mid-step, no, I still consider that kind of like you got to swing your leg over it. Or if you want to step through it, you got to really lean it down to the side for you to step through. Okay, so it's not as convenient, but it is convenient for hopping off the bike. There's nothing there to get in your way. Okay. So yeah, make a decision on the type of frame that you want. Right? Why are the bikes so heavy? Well, I think they designed these things so that they can handle all the torque that the motor gives. I've heard people who have modified bikes and put motors on a standard bike and not design it properly for that, and then they find the entire motor rip right off of that thing because it couldn't handle it, or something about it couldn't handle it. So yeah, they design these things really heavy. They're not lightweight. I mean, the typical e-bike probably weighs close to the 70-pound ranges, a little more, a little less. Okay, but they're usually in that general range. A regular bike that you buy, like a regular mountain bike, was probably mid-30s, something like that, maybe in weight. You're talking a bike that's twice as heavy, because you've got batteries, you've got motors, you got a heavy frame, built really heavy. If you have a suspension in the front fork, that adds weight. Everything adds weight. Okay. Let's talk about suspensions, since I mentioned that. Some bikes have front fork suspensions, some don't. So the benefit of the front fork suspension, of course, every time you hit a bump, or maybe a pothole, it eases the thing. So, because it absorbs some of that shock. Some bikes have full suspension where they actually have another shock absorber thing in the back of the bike, so that the rear wheel is absorbing it as well. Now, if you don't have one of those, you could always buy a seat post that has a shock in it. Okay, so there's a seat post suspension options that you buy, and those things can range anywhere from $30 to $200 in those ranges, depending on how good of a seat post you buy. I've never really needed one. I've always learned that if I see something coming up, I kind of step up a little bit and stand up on the pedals a little bit to kind of absorb it in my legs rather than continue sitting on it. But yeah, if you like full suspension, there's options for that. The bikes could have it built into the frame, or you can add a seat post that has that suspension. Let's talk about brakes. Brakes are kind of important. If you're going 20 miles an hour, or some bikes go 28 miles an hour, you might have to stop. And if you have to stop, well, better brakes are better, right? So you have mechanical brakes and you have hydraulic brakes. These are disc brakes typically, unlike the old rim brakes that used to come on your old bicycles. You pull on the brake and there's a little thing that, like some brake pads that squeeze up against the rim of your tire, right? A rim of your wheel, right? They don't do that anymore. It's all discs. There's a disc in the center by the axle, and so your brake will squeeze against that disc, because they call that a disc brake. You have a mechanical disc brake, which uses a standard cable, like a wired cable, and then that pulls on the brake pads against the rotor, and it stops you. Okay. Now, mechanical disc brakes only pull on one side. They don't pull evenly on both left and right side between the rotor. And so what happens is you have a lot of adjustments that need to be done on a mechanical disc brake. I was actually adjusting my disc brakes literally every single day before a ride. Got to the point where I said, this is just too much effort. And then there was one time that I couldn't really stop very well, and thought I was going to run into this dog and these two ladies because they didn't get out of the way, even though I was, ringing the bell and telling them on your left and all that stuff. They weren't moving, and I couldn't stop the bike very well. I was about ready to jump off of the bike path and jump off the bike, but luckily at the last minute they moved out of the way. But that was my deciding factor. I says, I gotta get something better as far as brakes. So the mechanical disc brakes, not as good. They don't stop quite as fast. They stop, but they're not quite as fast. And so what about hydraulic brakes? Well, this bike here has hydraulic brakes now. I have mechanical disc brakes on this Magicycle Cruiser. That's what comes normally with this bike. And I asked Magicycle if they would give me hydraulic brakes, and they did. So I installed the hydraulic brakes, and I can tell you without hesitation the amount of power I now have in stopping is unbelievable. I can literally skid the tires if I hit the brakes. I'm not kidding. I could just that's a skid, okay? So you can't do that on the mechanical brakes. And I didn't pull hard. I actually had only 2 fingers on my levers, my brake levers, and I was able to pull it that hard. And I wasn't pulling hard at all, and I was able to do that. So on your left. So in that sense, if you want good brakes, get hydraulic disc brakes. But I will tell you that adds quite a bit to the cost of the bikes. It could raise the bike's price up $200 or more. Okay, but it's kind of important, I would think, to be able to stop. All right, so that's that. That's something to consider. Okay. Another thing too that they used to do is they used to, sell bikes in different frame sizes. Right? We'll go back to frames again. Sorry, I get an itch up on my head, and I gotta scratch it there. I know that usually makes some sound on the microphone. The microphone's attached to the visor of my helmet. Yeah, they usually have different sizes of bike frames. They don't seem to have that much anymore. Some bikes do sell it in different sizes. I think Aventon sells their bikes that have large, medium, small size frames. But most of the manufacturers nowadays is one size fits all, and so your seat post is adjusted up and down to compensate for that, but the bike frame size is exactly the same. That's more common nowadays than different size actual bike frame sizes. Something to think about. So what is the difference between like a commuter bike and one of these standard full-size frame bikes? I don't even know what they would call this. I know this one's called a cruiser bike, but there's like beach cruisers and then there's cruisers. Okay, we're not talking about that. They just call it a cruiser. What's the difference between a commuter bike? Commuter bikes tend to be a little lighter in weight. They usually have smaller tires in the sense of it's not as wide. The KBO commuter bike that I did a review for instance, had 27.5-inch tires. These are 26-inch tires, but these are 26 by 4-inch wide tires. They call them fat tires. The commuter bike was 27.5 inches, but it was 2.4 inches wide. So it's not quite as wide as this fat tire bike. Well, that makes it easier to roll on standard pavement like this. This is a paved path. So it's easier to roll around, and they don't have these big knobby-looking tires. These knobby tires are good if I had to go up on grass or on gravel or wherever. So the commuter bikes are really designed for pavement riding. Less rolling resistance with better tires like that, thinner tires. Fat tire bikes, yeah, if I had to go off on the grass over here or ride up on some gravel, I would have no problems doing that with a fat tire. If I hit a pothole, I probably have less problems with it than if I hit it with a 2.25-inch tire or 2.4-inch tire. So you have to kind of look at that, all right? You got to say, what style of riding am I planning to do? Am I riding to work? Maybe a commuter style bike is fine. Or if you're like, I don't know what I'm going to be riding on, it could be just about anything, then maybe getting a fat tire bike might be better. Fat tire bike has more rolling resistance with this bigger tire, so you're going to get less mileage out of it. But I personally like the fat tire bikes. They're not as nimble. I know, like if you were to make quick turns, just kind of go left, go right, go left, like that kind of thing, you could do that better on that commuter bike than you can on this bike. This is not as nimble. So you got to make some decisions in that sense, okay? Some of the commuter bikes too, to give you a little more range out of the bike, they have a little bit less powerful motor. Instead of like maybe a 750 watt motor, they may give you a 500 watt motor in there. And you might think, well, then that's not as good. Well, actually, in a sense, sometimes it's better to have a smaller wattage motor. The smaller wattage motor means you don't use up as much power, which means you don't need as big of a battery, which means the weight of the bike goes lower because the batteries aren't as heavy. You see what I'm saying? Everything starts adding up. So, yeah, make a decision on the type, whether you need a commuter bike or whether you need something as robust as these bigger cruisers. Let's talk about batteries real quick. Now you're going to find that there's different size batteries. There's 36 volt batteries, 48 volt batteries, 52 volt batteries, and higher. More common than not, it's usually nowadays around the 48 volt batteries. That's probably the most common, but I still see 36 volt batteries out there. That's smaller voltage. And then you have some that have 52 volts. This Magicycle Cruiser is a 52 volt battery. So more voltage should give you ability to get a little bit more oomph out of that bike. You get a little more pep out of that thing, okay? But that also means you're eating up more power, which means you need more battery, okay? There's another rating that they give you. They give you the current ratings. So they'll rate it like, for instance, 48 volts 14 amp hours. The amp hour rating, that's the current ratings. The higher the current rating is, if you have 14 amp hours versus a 20 amp hour battery, the 20 amp hour battery essentially means, at 48 volts, 20 amp hours, or 48 volts, 14 amp hours. That 20 amp hour rating means you can go farther because there's just more battery in there for you to be able to go farther. It doesn't mean you're going to go faster. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means that you have more range. Your mileage is going to be more. You can go farther. I'm not talking mileage in terms of speed. I'm talking about going farther away, okay? So in my mind, I want the highest amp hours I can get that's reasonable, because as you add more amp hours, there's more cells inside the battery. These batteries are actually individual cells that are put together. They kind of look like AA batteries, but bigger, okay? They look like a bunch of AA batteries, big AA batteries, all put together inside one case, all right? So they're going to have more of those individual cells, and it's going to give you more range, all right? Each time they add more cells, it adds more cost to get more range. If your motor is, say, a 500 watt motor versus, say, a 750 watt motor, the 750 watt motor is eating up more power, meaning it wants more of your battery to run it, okay? So for instance, if you have one bike that's 500 watt motor and the other bike's 750, what's the basic difference? Well, the 750 probably has a better chance of going up the hill better than your 500 watt motor will. But to get up that hill, it needs power to get up the hill, which means it's going to eat into the battery more, wanting more power to do it, all right? So when you see like a commuter bike has a 500 watt motor, is that commuter bike designed to go up and down hills like crazy? No, it's not. It's actually better for more flat land than anything, okay? Not that you can't do it, but you're going to have a harder time doing it on a 500 watt motor commuter bike. Now, if the other bike is 750 watts, you're probably going to get over the hill a little bit easier, but you're going to eat up more battery power to do that. So again, you have to look at how am I riding? What type of terrain am I riding on? What am I planning to do with that bike? Okay, that'll help you decide whether you need a bigger motor or you don't. Now, some bikes will claim 750 watts, but they're actually not really 750. They might actually be 500 watt motors inside there that peak out at 750. So in other words, when the demand requires it to be more than its rating of 500 watts, it's able to do it on a short-term basis to get you up over that hill, okay? Other other bikes have a true 750 watt motor, so it's continuously 750. But those bikes usually also means that when you need even more power, it might peak at 1,000 or more. So in that sense, you get more power. You can get up a bigger hill. All right, it might have more torque. Torque is the ability for it to go up the hill. Like if you have a higher torque motor, it'll go up that hill a lot easier. If you have a lower torque motor, you won't be able to. Let's stop here for a second. So you have to kind of look at these things. These bikes are designed for different purposes. They have different motors. They have different ratings. If someone claims a 750 watt motor, you should first thing question it: is it truly 750 continuous motor, the power on the motor, or is it 750 peak? Because if they say 750 peak, they're probably a 500 watt motor that peaks at 750. If one says continuous 750, it's probably 750 that peaks at maybe 1,000. Okay, so legally speaking, many of the bike paths and stuff require you to be no more than 750 watts, and it has maybe a range, a maximum of 20 miles per hour. So you cannot go faster than 20 miles per hour. Which brings us to the concept of class. What class bike is your bike, okay? Well, there's 3 classes of bikes. There's class 1, class 2, and class 3 bikes. A class 1 bike essentially is a bike that with pedal assist, okay, sometimes known as PAS. You have pedal assist. With you pedaling, the motor kicks in, and it'll actually allow you to ride up to 20 miles per hour. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't go faster than 20 miles per hour. You can. If you keep pedaling harder, you might go past 20. But what happens is the motor will stop helping you once it hits 20 miles per hour. So if you're able to do 24 miles out of that extra 4 miles that you're getting is under your own power, all right? Because your motor has already stopped helping you because it's already cut itself off at 20. So that's called class 1. Pedal assist only, no throttles on those bikes. Then they have a thing called class 2. Class 2 bike has a motor that'll help you when you're pedaling up to 20 miles per hour. And there's also a throttle, like you see here on my right hand side. I have this half twist throttle. I have an accessory device on here that turns it into like a thumb throttle. So I push down on this rather than just kind of rotate it. Class 2 bikes will also do 20 miles per hour for both pedal assist and also throttle assist, okay? That's class 2. And again, it doesn't say that it doesn't go faster. It will go faster if you pedal harder. It's just that the motor will stop helping you after 20 miles per hour. Then there's class 3 bikes. Class 3 bikes means that the pedal assist, okay, not the throttle assist, the pedal assist will assist you up to 28 miles per hour. So if you're pedaling and you're going past 20, it's still helping you up to 28 miles per hour, okay? Now you may or may not have a throttle, but supposedly the throttle will not be able to help you up to the 28 miles per hour. That's under pedaling only. Class 3 bikes are a little bit harder on certain places. Like for instance, some paths will say class 1 and class 2 bikes are allowed, but not class 3s. Okay. Now technically, the Magicycle Cruiser is a class 3 bike because it does go up to 28 miles per hour. But when they ship the bike to you, it is set up as a class 2 bike. All right. In other words, in the menu of the display, it's set up so that it'll do exactly what a class 2 bike will do. It'll stop helping you at 20 miles per hour. But it doesn't mean that I can't go into the menu, modify it, and turn it into a class 3 bike, in which case it'll help me up to 28 miles per hour. So legally speaking, in order to be on this path, you are supposed to be setting up this Magicycle Cruiser for the standard class 2 classification. All right. Now, this bike path has a legal limit of 15 miles per hour, although I haven't really seen any posted signs here since we've been going around. It says 15, but I know it's typically, most of these things are 15. If you've been watching my display, you might know that I've been going 16, 17, 18, okay? And before all the comments start coming in, because I notice that a lot of people do comment, oh, you're breaking the law, you're doing 18 miles per hour, you're 3 miles an hour over. Really? Yeah, you could run into somebody. Okay, technically I guess you could. But if you're careful and you're watching and you're careful in the way you ride, and if you ever watch how I ride, I am very careful. Like I'll stop the bike if I says I can't get through, I stop. I don't force my way through like I did just a while ago. I had literally stopped and waited until people cleared out of my way before I went in and passed. But before you start commenting and saying, well, I've been watching your speedometer, you've been riding 18 miles an hour, so you're 3 miles over. Let me tell you, it's real hard to maintain 15 miles an hour. I mean, I've been trying to hold this throttle down to be the level, but it doesn't take much to bump you from 15 to 18 miles an hour. I mean, I'm at 15 now. If I accidentally push a little bit harder, it starts going up, and sometimes you don't recognize that. Okay, now it's at 16. Okay, I'm over the legal limit by 1 mile. All right, am I going to get ticketed for that? Probably not. First off, there's nobody out here to enforce that. But I think you have to look at these things as, your intent of how you plan to ride, and whether you're a safe rider or you're a dangerous rider. I consider myself relatively safe, and most of my subscribers will tell you that they watch how I ride and they says he's really safe, because if I don't think it's safe to do something, I'll stop or I'll wait and things. I don't force my way through. Okay. But I will say this, and we'll leave it at this. For you who might criticize me being 3 miles over the legal limit here on this path, I'll let you criticize me if you can tell me that you ride on the highway that is legally posted as 55 miles an hour. You never go past that 55 miles an hour. If you can tell me that you do that all the time, then I'll admit that my 3 miles an hour is not so good. Because I'll tell you, most of the people around my area here in the Chicago area, they're past 55. They're usually 65, 70, 75. Okay. Who's really breaking the law there, and who's more safer? My 3 miles over, or they're 10, 15, 20 miles over? Or if you're on a 40 mile an hour street, you don't accidentally hit 45 miles an hour sometimes? Come on. We all do it. It happens, okay? The intent is not there. Sometimes it's hard to maintain that true 15 miles an hour. Technically, I'm 0.5 miles an hour over. So anyways, I just wanted to put that out there. It seems like every time I do a bike ride, I have to mention that. Or the fact that you don't do full stops or whatever. We always mention this because people will criticize me for that too. Yeah, we passed one stop sign there. That's a parking lot stop sign. That's for you to stop so that the cars don't run you over who are in the parking lot. Well, every time we've ridden past there so far, no cars are moving out there. Everyone's parked, if they're there at all, because we're so early in the morning. So to do a full stop on it, that is the legal law. That's the thing you need to do. That's the legal thing to do. Many bikes don't do that. Okay, some of them don't even slow down. You notice I have been slowing down at least, but I do kind of a rolling stop. I slow down, I look, I don't see anything, I just keep moving. And the reason we do it, a lot of times for bikes especially, is because stopping, full 3-second stops, means you have to hop off of the bike, because you can't stay vertical, teeter-tottering on the bike for 3 seconds in a stationary position. You're going to have to hop off the bike, then hop back onto the bike and start your momentum up again to go past it. So what a lot of bikes will do is they will slow down at that stop sign. They'll look left and right, make sure there's nothing around there, and then they'll roll through it. Okay, and I've seen, at least here in Illinois, many of the police officers, I've noticed that they've noticed bikes doing that, and they don't do anything, because they realize that a full stop really is not that practical for a bicycle. And that's why some states have laws that allow them to kind of use the stop signs as like yield signs, where they can ride up to that stop sign, look around, if there's nothing there, they can ride right through it. Okay, I kind of wish Illinois would adopt that ruling as well, but somehow I have a feeling that will probably never happen here in Illinois. So I don't know, I just don't do it. Now I'm going to move up a little bit faster. I'm going to catch up to these two bike riders. Let's see if they actually stop at that stop sign. Okay. So they're going to be approaching it very shortly here. Hopefully my camera can catch it. But they're coming up to the stop. Let's see if they actually stop. And there you go. No stop. Okay. I don't even think they even slowed down. Now what I would do is I will now kind of do this, and then I'll move on. So I've slowed down enough so that I don't fall off the bike, but technically that's not a legal stop. Okay, but I sure did a lot more stop than the guys that were ahead of me, right? So, all right, back to what to look for in the bike. So look at your range on your battery. the higher amp hours that you have will give you more range. Right now, others will tell you that that's not truly the only function of that, but the practical function of it is just look at the amp hour rating. That'll kind of give you an idea. Do you have more range or you don't? Because if everything else being equal, the more amp hours you have, the more range you're going to get. The more wattage you have, hopefully a little more torque will happen, giving you a little more oomph out of that motor. Okay. All right, so we're doing about 11 miles an hour, something like that. Is what these guys are doing. They're on conventional non-electric bikes. I will pass them eventually, but this is not a smart time to pass because you have blind spots here. So again, being safe, you're best not to do any type of passing on there until you have a clear, open view that there's nobody happening on the left or the right, and then you can make your move. And typically what we'll do is we'll hit the bell, and then we'll say, on your left, okay? Get a bell, too. If you don't have a bell, get a bell. Now, up ahead here, there's a stop sign, but it's facing in the opposite direction. There's no stops for us, but there's stops for the other guys. That makes no sense. Why would one side need to stop and not the other side? See, we have no stop sign. If you see that other stop sign is reversed, and that's because these are access points. All right? And what it is for the guys that cut the grass and stuff, it's for them to get through there. Well, they don't cut the grass constantly, so there are very few people already through there. I'm going to get through here. On your left. Thank you. So basically, if you look at that, because I know I had that one video about seniors, important things to consider for seniors, and I get dinged by a lot of people saying you didn't stop at that stop sign. Well, we really don't have to tell you the truth, because it makes no sense that one side should stop, the other side should not stop. Both sides should stop in both directions if it's truly a stop sign. So that stop sign really means nothing. And no vehicles or anything ever go past there. So really, we know that nothing's there. I look, but yeah, they're gated too. By the way, those roads are gated. Both directions are gated. No cars are going through. Nothing's going through. So, but I answer that question a lot. A lot of people, kind of comment that you're not following the law. Well, nobody will ever ticket you for that. Nobody will ever get in trouble for that. Nobody will ever be dangerous for that at all, because nothing gets through those paths. They're both sides are gated off. All right. Get yourself a bell. Not all bikes come with bells. Okay. Some of them have them right at the brake lever. I know the Tektros have a bell. If you see my left hand here, if you squeeze it, it'll ring the bell. But when I changed to the hydraulic brakes, I kind of lost the bell because they don't have it on this hydraulic brake. This guy's running in the opposite direction. He should be running in the other way. So anyways, I added this little bell here, this little bar. It's kind of like a bar. So when you hit it, it gives you a ring. Got a deal on this thing. They had 3 of them for $7.99. Cannot find that anymore. Other companies have similar bells, probably the originals. These are probably knockoff bells. It does the same thing. They're like $17 or $18 each. So these were good deals. And the seller who was selling that on Amazon doesn't sell anymore. I guess they ran out and they never restocked them. So. All right, what other things? Displays, okay. Some displays are standard LCD screens. Other displays like this one from Magicycle are color displays. Now I can see it very well, even with sunglasses on, but I know on the camera it's very hard to see anything on this thing. The standard LCD screens may not look as fancy with color and everything, but they tend to be easier to see in the bright sun. So while some of them are cool, like this one, the other ones that are less cool are actually easier to read. Something to think about. Some bikes can be reprogrammed through their display. All right, other bikes cannot be reprogrammed. have more programmability. In other words, you can change the level of assist levels on your pedal assists, and you can change the maximum speed settings. All sorts of things can be done. Some bikes don't have that, so you have to kind of look and see, do I need that or do I not need that? Let's talk about saddles, all right? Some bikes have good saddles, some bikes don't. I'm talking about the seat, okay? Many people feel that the stock saddle that comes on most bikes are really bad. I tend to agree. You can buy aftermarket saddles, but again, that adds to your cost. The saddle I'm sitting on now is made by Bikeroo, and again, all of my accessories and things are in the description of my videos. So if you want to see what I'm using, just look there, and there's Amazon affiliate links there. I also have discounts too if you're looking at buying a bike. Whether you're buying one like this, the Magicycle Cruiser, or a Rad Power bike, or a KBO, or whatever other bikes, I have those discount codes are inside the description of my videos. Okay, and use the links that are there. That's how I get credit for it. Use the links and then use the codes. So don't go directly to the sites. Go use the link first and then put the code in. That's how I get the credit for your purchase. And what that means is essentially the companies will give me a few dollars of commission to as a thank you for sending business their way. All right. And what that means to me is that gives me a little bit of money that helps me create better videos for you. So I'll use some of the money sometimes, and I'll buy better cameras, or I'll buy some stuff on the bike or whatever makes our videos nicer. So yeah, the saddles. I use a Bikeroo saddle. The Bikeroo saddles have springs, so it's like spring loaded, and then there's ones that don't have springs. They're made out of like rubber. They call them elastomers, essentially the rubber. They call those made for stationary bikes. It's essentially the same saddle. One has a spring, one doesn't have a spring. So mine is actually made for stationary bikes, exercise bikes, like indoor exercise bikes, right? It's the exact same thing. It's just that it doesn't have the actual spring. Now, the reason I decided I didn't want that is because I had a bike in the past. It was a mountain bike, and I put a springy saddle on that one, and yeah, one side of the spring didn't work as well as the other, and I always felt lopsided. So I decided at that point that I would not buy saddles with springs anymore. So the non-spring version of the Bikeroo is what I have, that has the one made for exercise bikes, non-outdoor bikes, indoor bikes, whatever they want to call it. All right, let's talk about motor drives, okay? There's a thing called hub motors, and then there's a thing called mid-drive bikes. Now, hub motor is more common. The motor is actually on the rear hub of your rear wheel, okay? A mid-drive bike has the motor actually right at where your crank set is, where your pedals are, okay? That's where the motor resides. Now, typically, you'll find that those who are more into e-bikes, the more expensive bikes, tend to be mid-drive bikes, whereas the less expensive bikes tend to be hub-drive motors, okay? All of my bikes are hub-drive motors right now, although one day I would like to try a mid-drive, but I don't know whether I really would like it that much. Now, they'll say that, the ability to climb hills and your torques and everything is better on a mid-drive bike. That could very well be the case, but many mid-drive bikes do not have a throttle. Some of them do, but most of them don't, okay? Now, because I throttle and I pedal at the same time, sometimes, like this whole ride, I've been throttling most of the time. I would miss the throttle, okay? So what is the deal with the mid-drive? Well, the mid-drive bike requires you to use your gears. You notice here I have a gear shifter here. I haven't touched it once since we've been riding. That's because I have a throttle that's helping me along. I don't really need to mess with it because I'm not even really pedaling at this point during all this entire talk. And so if you use a mid-drive bike, you have to use your gears, okay? Like if you stop the mid-drive bike and you start up again, you better be in gear number 1 or you're not going to be moving that bike, all right? It's almost like the equivalent of driving a manual stick drive car, right, with manual transmission. You can't start up a car in 3rd or 4th gear. You've got to start it up in 1st gear. That was actually the first car I've seen pass through here in probably the last 3 or 4 weeks that I've been riding. Same thing with mid-drive. If you start up, you have to be in 1st gear. If you want to go faster, you got to move your gear to 2nd gear, then the 3rd gear, then the 4th gear. You're going to be constantly shifting, okay, if you have a mid-drive bike. So if you're used to using your gears, you're probably fine with a mid-drive bike. If you're one that's not used to using gears, you're probably going to want to avoid a mid-drive bike because the mid-drive bike will require you to shift. All right, so just think of it as the equivalent of driving a manual transmission car, not an automatic, right? You got to shift, right? So again, like I said, if you're into biking and you're used to that, no big deal. If you're not used to it, it's a big deal because it would be murder for you to have to deal with. All right. Hub drives, less expensive motors. Some people feel they don't last as long. I have not had a bike die out on me yet, but again, I haven't had bikes that long, so I don't know when the hub drive motor will eventually die. I have no idea. But no problems with mine so far. Okay. And again, like I said, they're typically on less expensive bikes. Let's talk about price. I think the most common price is I'd say between $1,000 and $2,000. With the $1,500 to $1,600 price range is probably the most common price range, I think. So what happens is people, okay, one side is stopped, the other side is going through. So I cannot go through if one side stops and the other doesn't. So they're both stopping. So thank you very much. Thank you. I always wave thank you to them. Some cars know to stop to keep you safe. Other cars just keep blasting through. But if one side stops and the other side doesn't, you better not cross. So price-wise, I think the most common price is the $1,500 to $1,600 price range. That's when you start getting some really nice bikes. Okay, not the best, but pretty nice ones. This Magicycle Cruiser that I'm riding here is on sale $1,589, I believe. And then you can save an extra $100 with my discount code in the description of the video. That brings you down to $1,489, right? And I don't think they charge for shipping or the tax either. They kind of cover that for you. So that's a pretty good deal. And this thing has a lot of torque on this bike. I can go up and down hills without a problem. More so than my other bike. I had a Rad Rover 5 that had some more problems going up and down the hills. Because that was a advertised 750 watt motor, but many people feel it's 500 watts that peak at 750. The Magicycle Cruiser is a continuous 750 that peaks well over 1,000, even though the gauge only shows it goes up to 900. Most people think it's a lot more than that, 900. So yeah, I would say the $1,000 bikes are a little more limited. They might have not as big of a motor. They might not have a large enough battery, so your range might be limited. Some of them will only do maybe 10 miles of range. Some of them will go 14, 15 miles of range, something like that. I'm gonna go through this side. It's hard to make that sharp corner turn over there. So, but when you hit around the $1,500, $1,600 ranges, you start getting some better quality components on there. Your derailleurs would be better grade, like they might be Shimano derailleurs versus some brands that you may never have heard of before. Your brakes might be Tektro brakes, which are better than some off-branded brakes or non-branded brakes. So little odds and ends. Components are better when you spend a little bit more money. Morning. And so I would say expect to spend $1,500 to $2,000 for a pretty decent bike. Okay, now I'm not saying that these are the best, but they are reasonable, right? Somebody's burning something here. Yeah, smells like a bit of marijuana. That's what I smell. Now, you might want to know, how do you know what that smells like? Well, I've never partake in any of that, but I know what it smells like. If you've ever gone to college off campus, you know what the smell smells like. Plus, I worked in law enforcement, so I know what the smell smells like. I've always joked that I've had my hands on more drugs than drug dealers. We collect the drugs for evidence. I've processed a lot of drugs for fingerprints and things, drug paraphernalia, whatever. So yeah, I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I'm ducking. Sometimes the trees, the noisy trucks. Sometimes the trees are a little bit hanging a little too low. And you don't duck, you run right into the tree branch. All right, let's get away from this area first before I talk a little more about stuff. It's kind of noisy. Tree work ahead, okay? So yeah, if you plan to spend, I would say between $1,500 and $2,000, you can get a pretty decent e-bike. Yeah, not to say that you can't get one for about $1,000, because they do make them. I think the lowest bike I've seen that's an e-bike is the Jetson Bolt. They sell that at Costco. I think those are like $360. Really small little bike. I'm not kidding. And when I'm saying small, I'm talking small. They look like mini bikes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, they look like a mini bike. And I remember those, like mini, what would they call those bikes? Mini dirt bikes? Kind of like that, yeah. But it's an electric bike. I've seen a number of people on them. Do they work? Yep, absolutely works. Can you go far on them? Not really. Yeah, you're limited on range. You're limited on power and stuff, but yeah, it works. Yeah, it's kind of a popular bike too. Morning. So yeah, you can get something to start for $370 or so, plus tax, right? $400 something or so, something like that. I think that's the least expensive bike I've seen. Anyways, I hope all this stuff has helped you out. Some of the accessories you may want to consider too. Although it's not sold with your bike, there's some things that I think you should get if you're going to consider getting an e-bike. Get some mirrors, okay? Now, you may not be able to do left and right mirrors, but get at least the left-hand mirror. The right side is kind of hard sometimes because we got so much stuff on the right. We've got the half-twist throttle here. You got a gear shifter here. Sometimes it just doesn't lend itself to be able to put a mirror. I actually shifted my gear shifter further in on the handlebar just so that I can put this right-hand mirror here. And of course, it doesn't stick out at the same distance as the left. The left side has less things on it. There's your pedal assist lever is over here. Your on-off buttons and stuff's over here, and that's about it. So putting the mirror is actually further on the left side. You can stick out a little bit further. Over here, it moves a little bit further in because you got all these things in the way. So, yeah, that's called a rolling stop, right? So that way I don't have to hop off the bike in order to do a full stop. So get some mirrors. You might want to look at bikes will have lights. You can see here I have an accessory light blinking over here. I do this because this is a lot more powerful light. Magicycle sells this one. I'm not sure what the cost of this was. $39, $49? I'm not sure exactly. You have to look it up yourself. But it's a lot more powerful than the included headlight. Okay. Some bikes include headlights, some of them don't. This one doesn't. It does include a headlight and tail light. And when you hit the brakes, the tail light will light up whether you have the lights on or not. All right. So I count on the brake light, but I also have a blinking accessory light there too. So I kind of hit everything up with lights in the front and back. The reason I turn it on even during the daytime is because this light is so bright, it kind of just lets people know I'm here. So I do it just as a visibility thing, okay? Get a helmet. I would highly suggest you get a good helmet. I have some referral links for you as well for helmets. A good helmet that has something like Mips, which is a system to help it's like an inner lining inside the helmet. Morning. I won't talk too much about it here. Thank you. But you can look at those reviews and stuff, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But get a decent helmet. I also wear a safety vest, so I have a yellow safety vest on right now, just for visibility. Okay, you could do that, or just wear like a yellow shirt or something that it's more visible. Because if you're riding a black bike and you're wearing all black on, you don't stand out too much. People won't even see you. I mean, you kind of blend into the backgrounds a little bit. Cars won't see you, so better off to be wearing something bright so that they can tell that you're there. All right, other accessories that you can consider. I have a front basket on my bike. Many bikes actually come with rear rack. Some of them don't, but you might want to consider adding a rear rack or a front basket. I like the front basket because I put my digital audio recorder there. Sometimes I put my lock. I have a Ebikes lock. Sometimes I have it in there. Put another bag to keep my keys and things like that. It's just convenient, quite frankly. The rear rack, I'll strap on a secondary battery back there, or my tools that go inside some panniers or a regular tool bag back there. Get a water bottle cage. I put my water bottle cage on the rear rack, or on the front basket. It's just convenient for me to put it there. Okay, I think this video's gone long enough. So I hope this has helped you guys. If you're looking at a bike, consider the discount codes that I have inside the description of the videos. And if not, there's a lot of other bike brands out there. Morning. A lot of other bike brands out there, and just be careful what you're buying. Make sure you're buying things that have good reputation and the like. Oh, one last thing I wanted to say before we go further is that somebody had asked me once, if you buy these bikes online, who's going to fix the bike if there's a problem with it? Yeah, that's a problem sometimes. A lot of bike shops will not fix bikes that they don't sell. I think they do this purposely in order to try to get a sale. But there's other companies that are starting to pop up that they will actually do repairs on bikes they don't sell. They're specifically just like bike servicing companies. They'll help you put it together, they'll help you service it, all sorts of stuff. So I'm kind of slowing down here because we got a whole bunch of kids going up on that bridge. And so look into that. But again, a lot of bike stores will only service what they sell, kind of forcing you to buy whatever bikes they have. But you're going to find that you have a lot more options if you look at brands that are also sold online. Some of them sell it at bike stores as well as online. But check out your options, find out what's available in your area. And like I said, there are more and more services that are popping up which are helping to repair bikes that they don't sell. And they're just specifically repair services, installation and repair services. Get a good lock for your bike. Personally, I never leave my bike out of my sight because e-bikes can get stolen really quickly. I don't care how good your lock is. They can cut through these locks with no problems now. They have portable angle grinders that they carry with them, and then they'll cut your lock in 30 seconds and get your bike. So I never leave it out of my sight, but I still have locks available, just to kind of help deter the guys that don't have stuff like that with them to cut your locks. Morning. All right, I think we've talked enough. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Help push this to other people so that they can see it. That happens when you hit the like button because YouTube will start pushing the video to others if you do that. Share it with your friends too. It helps that way as well. And if you like the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because that'll help me on the long run. I'll talk to you guys next time.